terrorist who had a $10 million bounty on his head. But that's what, our government are deciding. I'm concerned about Syria, and I'll tell you the main reason why is because north of Syria, everyone knows is where? Turkey.
Mm-hmm.
And Turkey want their feet inside of Syria. And this could open the door for Turkey to come in. We don't want them on our borders, that's for sure.
Wow. LightToTheNationsMinistry.com, LightToTheNationsMinistry.com. Aaron, thank you as always.
Pleasure, Brandon. Thank you. God bless.
You too. We're going to get a show put together with Bob Cornuke and Aaron and talk about the Temple Mount and the City of David. That'll be a great conversation. All right. Hey, folks, if you appreciate what we're doing, we need your support now more than ever, please. Thank you for those that already are. WorldviewFoundation.com, WorldviewFoundation.com. You also find our mailing address there if you prefer to support us through the mail. Big show tonight on Brandon House Live. I've got with us a lady whose husband was thrown into jail, federal prison. You won't believe the reason why. Patrick Wood, David Pine, so many great guests tonight. Hope you'll join us. Till then, I'm Brandon House. May God save America. Take care.
You are watching Worldview 2, built on the 35 years.
Colonel Rob Maness has a lifelong record of providing dedicated service to this nation. Having worked his way up from the enlisted ranks to full colonel, he served our country for more than 32 years. He has served as a bomber squadron commander, bomb disposal technician, Joint Chiefs of Staff Operations Officer, assisted the National Security Team with the campaign plan for the global war on terrorism. He authored the first theater nuclear war plan and served as the Vice Commander of America's largest airborne intelligence wing. Colonel Rob Maness is a true American hero. This is Rob Maness Live.
In a million years, I would not take the flu shot, and I'll tell you why, because this is what Cochrane and BMJ have found. People who take the flu shot are protected against that strain of flu. They're 4.4 times more likely to get a non-flu infection. And you might find, and a lot of people do, that they get the flu shot and then they get sick. They're usually not getting the flu. They're getting something that is indistinguishable from the flu because the flu shot gives you something called pathogenic priming. It injures your immune system so that you're more likely to get a non-flu viral upper respiratory infection. In fact, the Pentagon published a story, and you can cite this, it's by Wolfe, W-O-L-F-E, in January of this year, in which they said that the flu shot not only primes you for flu, but it primes you for coronavirus. If you get, they had a placebo group and they had a vaccine group because they wanted for military readiness to see if the flu shot was prophylactic against coronavirus. What they found is actually the people who got the flu shot were 36% more likely to get coronavirus. And that's not a lone study. We found 6 other major studies that say the same thing. If you get the flu shot, you're more likely to get coronavirus.
Welcome back to Whistleblower Wednesday. The Rob Maness Show is live on Worldview Tube and our X Spaces simulcast. Well, there you have it. A Pentagon paper shows that service members are taking seasonal flu shots that are more likely to get sick. But the Pentagon's going to kick them out for not taking it. We got to talk about military vaccination requirements, folks. The military would rather lose quality members than grant them exemptions for even the flu shot now. At least 4 military members that I know of are being forced from the military for requesting religious, medical, or administrative accommodations for the seasonal flu shot. Why? It's not for readiness because, as you can see in that cold open video A published Pentagon paper says you're 4.4 more times more likely to get sick after getting the seasonal flu shot. It's not for public health either under those circumstances. And after what we've experienced with the side effects from the COVID mRNA vaccines, why are we doing this and risking further damage to our force readiness by even considering seasonal mRNA flu vaccines? What is the compelling government interest in not retaining these military members? Is it because they dare to ask why? Well, we have one of those members as my guest today to discuss the situation and why he's asking for relief. But he had his pay stopped for months, putting his family into a financial crisis. Brennan Skilperort, I'm going to call him Skip because that name's hard to pronounce, as a 17-year active duty Air Force major and a pilot in Air Mobility Command with 0 prior disciplinary actions in his career. AMC, the Mobility Command, refused to process his flu shot religious accommodation request. His base refused to give him a medical exemption, even though he had a severe adverse reaction to a previous flu shot and was able to prove natural immunity with a highly positive antibody test. His command gave him a letter of reprimand and sent him to a discharge board. He's currently waiting for the Secretary of the Air Force to make a decision whether he gets kicked out or not. And since he's active duty, here's the disclaimer, folks. The major's views are his own, and they do not represent the Department of the Air Force or the Department of Defense in any way. Skip, welcome to the Rob Maness Show.
Hello, sir. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, we appreciate it. Hey, man, just for my audience sake, very quickly, give an overview of your Air Force career. I mentioned in the opening that you have a spotless record from a disciplinary issue. Have you ever had any problems with the law, so to speak, in the military?
Not until I requested an accommodation for the COVID shot. None.
Yeah. So when you came into the Air Force, have you always flown the C-130? What's your career path look like?
Sure. I graduated from ROTC at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University in 2008, and I graduated from Vance Air Force Base pilot training in 2010 in the summer. Just due to the sensitive nature of my next assignment, I'm just going to gloss over it and say I did intel, surveillance, and reconnaissance for 4 years. It was highly rewarding, very, very intense, very exciting career. But at that time, the Air Force had promised those of us who had previously gone through UPT in a pilot capacity and not done the truncated RPA or remotely piloted aircraft training, that they would offer us a cockpit slot if we so wanted it. And at the end of my 4 years, I said, thanks, this has been great, but I'd like to get back in the cockpit. So I selected, got C-130s, and have been flying C-130J aircraft since 2015.
Well, we appreciate your service, especially that first 4 years. I know how hard it is. You know, I had to send pilots from my B-1 squadron to do UAVs as secondary assignments and to do ALOs, Air Liaison Officer, too. I was also the vice commander of the 55th Wing, the Airborne Intelligence Wing, so I'm very familiar with those ISR programs you're talking about. So we definitely appreciate you doing that. So I have to ask, you really do want to stay in the Air Force. You're dedicated to serving your country, right?
Yes, absolutely. And I took my oath seriously, and I place it above any other convenience or comfort in my life. And I have sworn an oath to defend and protect this Constitution and what our country stands for.
Yeah, and you mentioned in your bio that you sent me that you've flying the 130, you've gotten to go around the world. I know that feeling, but more importantly, experiencing humanity all over the world and in our own country has given you a slightly different perspective. How does that perspective help you with what you're dealing with right now?
It absolutely makes me more grateful for our country. I've been all over Latin America. I've seen Europe, parts of Asia, almost every continent except for Antarctica, still on the bucket list. But the more I travel, the more I realize that the freedoms that were accorded and given by right of birth and protected by our Constitution do not exist in other countries. My wife's Canadian, and they don't have the same free speech protections that we have. Think of the trucker protest, where they had their bank accounts frozen. We have a level of freedom and autonomy in this country that is sacred, and the rest of the world looks on with envy. Not perfect, but this is an amazing country, and I would give my life for her.
Yeah, I know the feeling. I still would. I've been out for, since late 2011 now, and I would do it again in a heartbeat. All they have to do is call, Well, before we get into the flu stuff, though, I want to talk about your experience with the COVID vaccine mandate, if you don't mind, and just talk through what you did there, because I think it's relevant to where we're at today. When the COVID mandate got implemented and was being what Pete Hegseth now says unlawfully implemented, what did you do from the perspective of whether you thought you should take that shot or not?
Sure. When the mandate came out in the late summer of 2021 from Secretary Austin, at that time, I was unaware that there were no fully FDA approved shots available to the US military or the rest of our country. So I didn't know the illegality of the mandate. So I applied for a religious exemption. I had asked my medical team, and if at any point, if I'm rambling on, just feel free to interrupt. But if I go too long, I asked my medical team, because I'd had previous adverse reactions to shots. My wife and I have a gene deficiency, which I won't go into, but it's contraindicated with shots, and it caused a host of miscarriages before we had our first son. And so I was very concerned about taking this still experimental vaccine. And the only way that, since my medical exemption was refused, they wouldn't even consider it for COVID. And I didn't know about the illegality. All I could do was apply for a religious exemption. I knew that at that time that there was aborted fetal tissue, despite all the reporting. Again, Pfizer lied. And I had a host of concerns. So we applied for that. That went through the wickets. And that was finally denied in the late spring, early summer of 2022. During that time, I learned about the illegality of the mandate. And I specifically asked my commander for I brought up that, sir, the president has not waived informed consent. By the way, the president waiving informed consent does not mean you can force emergency use authorization vaccines on military members. It just removes the requirement of the government to give them informed consent before they administer the product. So even with the president waiving informed consent, you are still not allowed to mandate non-approved products on military. He said, yes, I have seen that memo, but no, you can't see it. So fast forward, we became an adjoining plaintiff. My wife and I became adjoining plaintiffs in the Doster versus Kendall lawsuit, and we won the preliminary injunction against the Air Force in the summer of 2022.
Was that the case out of Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio? Yeah,
it was, yes.
I wanted to ask you about that because you're the first person I've been able to interview that was involved in that case. Were you aware of the deposition evidence that talked about the Secretary of Air Force Kendall at the time, which is why it's Doster v. Kendall, giving a direct order to the Corona Conference, which is all the generals coming together after he kicked out the staff, that there will be no religious exemptions? Are you aware of that evidence?
I am aware, yes.
Yeah. And
multiple whistleblower testimony.
I assume you considered it credible.
I do. It was part of the lawsuit, and the whistleblower testimony contained therein. I also thought incredibly shocking was the Air Force lawyers' response that they were going to continue to do what they thought was necessary until the court stopped them. I believe the entire audience in the room gasped.
Wow. Without regard for the potential side effects, adverse reactions, effect on the readiness of the force, any of that?
Apparently not. And by that point in early 2022, there was a very large danger signal, not only in VAERS, but also in DMED. And that's been covered multiple times by other whistleblower service members.
Yeah, I've had Ted Macy and even Mark
Lovely.
Bashaw on, and I'm a close follower of Dr. Teresa Long, the Army flight surgeon, and everything. Although I still hope to interview her at some point, but I think she stayed on active duty, so we have scheduling problems. But that's what I'm talking about, Skip. You know, and since you're a pilot, hanging out with the crew force and those kind of things. What were folks talking about then when that information came out, and what do they continue to talk about that fly airplanes for the United States Armed Forces?
Sure.
What are you guys talking about?
My unit alone was very concerned about taking it, and there were about 50 of us in our unit of just under 200, so almost a quarter, that had informed our commands that we did not want to take it. Initially, our enlisted members were offered early separation. And then when over 40 of them said, yeah, we want out, we don't want to take this, they withdrew that and said, nope, sorry, you either take it or you're going to get an Article 15. I know multiple pilots that had injuries from it. A lot of them had brain fog after they took it when they were, especially at altitude, because we do airdrop and we fly unpressurized often, especially when unpressurized. Some of my coworkers stated that they had a pretty severe brain fog. So it's very concerning.
Any declared in-flight emergencies because of it that you're aware of?
Not from my coworkers. I heard some stories, but they were secondhand through other circles.
Yeah,
not personally.
Yeah, that's one of the things I'm concerned about, and I keep talking about it, but I don't see any evidence that anybody in the Department of Defense has started a serious investigation, and that is over 95% of the force took this shot. And my assumption is the aviators are included in that over 95% of the force, and the ones between the age of 25 and 40 are the heartbeat of the aviation force in the U.S. Armed Forces. So that's very concerning. And I just wonder, and we got to take a commercial break. When we come back, we can continue this discussion, and we'll see a clip about mRNA bird flu vaccine, which really should scare you, folks, when we come back from this break with active duty Air Force Major Brennan Skip. Not going to say the last name again. I'll trip over it. But Skip and I will be right back, and we'll continue this fascinating discussion. Get people in here, folks, in the space so they can ask him questions that he'll probably be able to answer most of them. We'll be right back on the Rob Maness Show.
Hello, I'm Brandon House. Would you like to gain access to over 20 years of my radio shows, TV shows, my books? I've written 15 books, and most of those books are ebooks now, and we have conference DVDs, conferences where we filmed our conferences at the Ozarks, literally starting 20 years ago. It's all available in our archived vault. All you have to do is go to worldviewtube.com/vault, worldviewtube.com/vault, and for a reasonable monthly fee, you gain access to over 20 years of Christian worldview programming, news, information, books, documentaries, and a powerful search engine. And folks, it's a great way not only to educate yourself, equip yourself, but it's a big way that you can help fund our continuation as a broadcast network. Please check it out. worldviewtube.com/vault, worldviewtube.com/vault, and help us continue pushing out a Christian worldview.
There's currently at least 3 mRNA bird flu injections being developed. And the most concerning one is by Arcturus Therapeutics in the United States. They're currently running a trial funded in part by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. They're testing this self-amplifying replicon bird flu, and they call it a pandemic injection. I'm not sure how they know that there'll be a pandemic, but that's what they call it. So they're preparing for this, and we have to keep a very close eye on this. And they're starting to roll it out at the opportune time for them to try and interfere with the upcoming Senate confirmation.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's Whistleblower Wednesday, and I can't believe we still have to be talking about saving our military service members from the crushing blows of the Department of Defense and their military services about vaccines. Did we not learn anything? Even the Secretary of Defense has said the COVID vaccine mandate was unlawfully implemented, and something happened during all of that noise around the COVID vaccine, and now commanders are ordering people to take flu vaccines. And one of those individuals is an active duty Air Force major. Skip is with me today. He's a C-130 pilot, has 17 years in the military, never a blemish on his record, but now has been given a letter of reprimand, has had his pay stopped for several months. I think that's been restarted now. And Skip, welcome back to the show. You know, in the information that you sent me in our discussions before we came on and my research, you mentioned something about learning about immoral issues surrounding the flu shot that led you to take some of the actions that you've taken and make some of the requests you've made. What were those moral issues that you've learned about?
Yes, thanks so much for asking, because a lot of people don't consider this aspect. The same companies that are doing testing on aborted fetal tissue and have other highly unethical practices, as I found during my research looking into the COVID vaccines or shots, because they're not vaccines, they don't prevent transmission or contraction of the virus nor hospitalization. The FDA, CDC has sponsored a lot of unethical studies, including studies on mentally handicapped children and also medical studies in prisons. And that's besides the testing on aborted fetal tissue. Those same companies that are producing other shots are companies that don't have morals for which I can be a part. I like to tell it this way. If you and your family had given to a charity for the past 10 years and you realize that the entire top staff of that charity engaged in human trafficking, would you continue to donate to that charity? The answer is no, absolutely not. So regardless of all the poisons and the other toxins that get put into shots, including thimerosal, the mercury, preservatives, etc., we have a moral obligation by our religious conviction not to be a part and take these shots from these companies.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I'm glad that you mentioned that, because I think that's like you said, it's a very important issue. Now, as I did my research for this particular show, I had heard there was mRNA vaccines on the flu shots coming.
Yes.
But I think they're actually already here in some places because the studies are being done. So people are being injected with them through adverse reaction studies, at least the testing and those kind of things at this point. So they're closer than I thought they were. Is that accurate from your understanding?
From everything we can find, yes. We've found the news articles about those studies, and it's incredibly concerning because mRNA has been proven, as Dr. McCullough has shown, especially in the study from Sweden that came out in the past few weeks. It does, in fact, alter your genes. It does, in fact, those particles do enter the nucleus of your cells, and they do modify your DNA.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, I'm extremely concerned. I wasn't aware of it when I volunteered to take the first shot, or the Moderna shot, early as a volunteer for the trials and everything, and wasn't aware of the issues. And my wife's a breast cancer survivor, and she ended up taking it about 6 months after I did because I had no side effects. But I think I'm unusual in that category. But then that's about right after she took it is when all the information started exploding about this issue and things like turbo cancer and everything. So I'm very concerned. And I think you guys that have been able to find the courage to stand up on active duty are doing the right thing. That's why I support you. The the flu shot itself, look, I was a commander, Skip, I was a commander as a flight commander in a flying squadron. I was a squadron commander in a combat flying squadron. I was a vice wing commander of the Air Force's only airborne intelligence wing that operations around the world. And not one time did I give a written or verbal order that you will take the flu shot. It was always hey, we'd like you to take the flu shot. It helps keep the spread down, and it helps keep us from having too many denifs, those kind of things. But never once was I asked, or did I even think to give an order to make somebody take that stuff, because I knew it was about their own human decisions, and it was something that was provided because our medical care is provided for us in the military. When did that change, and what was the change? Was it overt?
Sure. As some previous study I did, when the flu shot was first introduced to the military, it was mandated, but they found that this is back in the late 40s, early 50s, that there was a waning effect. And further study revealed that the flu was mutating so quickly that the previous year's so-called vaccine was no longer effective. And so the mandate was actually dropped. Further research and study was done, and they decided, well, we're going to continue, we're going to renew it every year, basically. And so the mandate was turned back on. People I've talked to, even some of the really diehard COVID adherents who thought the shots were our savior, have said, but why are you guys getting kicked out over the flu shot? Everyone knows it's not effective. And it's even on the best year, it's 40% effective at preventing that year's strain. But as you brought up in your intro, recent studies have shown you're up to 25% more likely to get the flu, not just other respiratory viruses, but the flu from this past year's flu shot.
Yeah, that study that I mentioned, I love doing these shows because when I do the research, I always learn something new. And I wasn't aware of that Pentagon study that Kennedy talked about in the opening video, and that surprised me, that the flu shot, or the seasonal flu shot, to increase by over 4 times the likelihood you're going to get an upper respiratory infection of some kind. I mean, why would you put that into our aviators? That's the thing that denifs people the most. Denif is duties not to include flying, folks. The denifs people the most is upper respiratory infections. It causes ear problems, breathing problems, all that. You don't want to go fly. We don't want you to fly when you have those, because if something occurs, that's going to be 10 times worse when you're going up and depressurizing, coming back and down into pressure and those kind of things. So did that surprise you? Had you known about that study?
The one in the opening, I had not. That was the first that I had encountered that. The study I was referring to came out from Children's Health Defense, Kennedy's organization, actually. And they took a study that was done.
Hopefully the Colonel. There we go.
Go ahead, Skip.
That was a study that was done by another organization, and Children's Health Defense republished it. But those things together just prove that you are increasing risk to force by forcing service members to get these products. And up until COVID, I've talked to multiple lawyers and chaplains, the honest and good ones. Mm-hmm. Religious and medical accommodations for the flu shot were granted in sufficient numbers. But since COVID, there's been a huge crackdown. Previously, the benchmark, as published in the military's own regulations, and I looked at the Navy's, the Army's, the Air Force's own pubs on this, 90% uptake was the benchmark. Since COVID, even though it still says 90, the way the commanders push it, it's sitting at 100%. And if you don't comply, then you're going to get punished, like I was.
So going back to the Doster v. Kendall case and that evidence that we talked about, has anybody ever been held accountable by following that order, which I think is illegal, from the Secretary of the Air Force, saying there will be no religious exemptions approved?
As far as I know, no.
Yeah, unfortunately, until somebody is held accountable, I think you'll probably see about 100% denying of that, and even our chaplains have been silenced, so to speak, over the COVID mandate, and I would expect that to continue.
Absolutely.
Until we see some sort of accountability and people held accountable. That will likely continue, because that's just the way the power circle in the armed forces works. I mean, it's the one place in America where you have ultimate power as a commander, almost. And until
I may add one thing to that.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry if I interrupted you.
No,
I've had several military defense lawyers and chaplains tell me that they were directed not to support service members' accommodations or defend them legally. My first defense attorney said, if he was told by his leadership, if you adequately defend service members against the COVID mandate, your personal career is in jeopardy. And the chaplains were told not to approve accommodations. And when it came to the COVID, my first chaplain interview, they completely unsubstantiated my religious beliefs. And it took a headquarters chaplain to come back and review my case and say, nope, they absolutely blew that one. He absolutely has sincerely held religious beliefs. The chaplain corps across the board failed us. Yeah, the JAG Corps, the chaplain corps, and the commanders across the board really have failed us all in this. And we'll continue that discussion. But I think there may be some hope. And I want to give you a chance to talk about what's going on currently with your case in the next segment. And when we come back, we'll see Dr. McCullough talk about the dangers of the mRNA vaccines personally, right here on the Rob Maness Show. We'll be right back.
A vaccine for the bird flu, whether in humans or livestock, will work. Look, the apprehension about vaccines following what happened with COVID is very high. I would never do it. If you told me I should do it, I might consider it. But I think reluctance and avoidance of vaccines is at an all-time high here and globally, and for good reason. What do you say in that area?
There's a piece out in British Medical Journal saying vaccinating the birds and the poultry will make it worse. It's a disaster. The virus will become stronger and more resistant to vaccine immunity in humans. So far, the CSL Seqirus vaccine actually caused human death in normal volunteer trials. It looks dangerous, and even worse on the horizon is the Moderna messenger RNA bird flu human vaccine, or the CEPI self-replicating messenger RNA vaccines. Humans don't need bird flu vaccines. They simply need prevention measures, nasal sprays, throat sprays, gargles, and early treatment kits. The Wellness Company has stepped in the middle of this policy madness to bring a practical solution to America.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's Whistleblower Wednesday, and we're talking to the active duty Air Force Major C-130 pilot Skip that is in the midst of going through a process that might ultimately lead to his involuntary discharge. His package, from my understanding, is at the Secretary of the Air Force's level for a decision, and hopefully the Secretary of the Air Force, the new one that President Trump has appointed, will be able to see through a very clear lens that's not clouded by having had to participate in all of this up to this point. And Skip, welcome back. Look, one of the things that you asked for was not just a religious accommodation, but a medical accommodation too. And it sounds like you had a pretty good case. Tell us about that.
Sure. In a previous year, I had taken the flu shot, and immediately, talking the next day, I was bedridden for almost 3 days. I did not get out of bed except to use the restroom and to grab light meals. And that was it. That's how sick I was, the sickest I've ever been in my entire life. When I spoke to the medical personnel at my base, they said, unless you've had an anaphylactic reaction. And I said, hold on, wait 1 sec. This was a phone conversation. So you're saying, unless I almost died, you're not willing to consider a medical exemption for a product that put me down for 3 days? And the chief medical officer at our base said, yes, that's correct. So they didn't even consider me for a medical exemption, despite the fact that that year, 2023, I was able to prove with a high antibody test that I had more than a robust reaction to the flu. It was subclinical, didn't even lose a day of work that year, but I already had the flu, and so I had natural immunity.
Wow. So just for folks at home, what does anaphylactic reaction mean?
So that is a swelling of your pharynx, your air passageway. Basically, you can't breathe.
Wow. That's pretty long ways towards losing your life to have to get the opportunity to have a medical exemption for a seasonal flu shot. Right. And the more I hear about this, I'll be honest, folks, it pisses me off. The story does anyway. But I'm really disappointed in the current leadership in the Department of Defense that hasn't grasped hold of all these cases and said these are coming into a special office for adjudication right now, because what was done previously, and this is retired Colonel Rob Maness saying, it's not the major, okay, and I don't speak for the Air Force or the Department of Defense either, but folks that are in leadership up there, if you hear this, pull these cases into a special adjudicating office right now at the Secretary of Defense level and get these things adjudicated in a way that provides justice and relief for these individuals, because they are being abused and their families are being abused by this system that continues to run seemingly on autopilot. That's the end of my rant there, Skip. And tell folks where your package is at today. I mentioned it in my opening to the segment and in the cold open a little bit, but what's the status?
Sure. And backing up just a touch, alongside that same time frame, November of 23, when I requested my medical exemption, a buddy of mine, also in the Doster versus Kendall plaintiff list, got his medical waiver for the flu shot granted just for headaches. Yeah, it was causing him headaches over the past few years, and they granted his, but not mine. So medical exemption exhausted. I tried for a religious exemption for the 2023-2024 flu season. My commander never responded to that, ignored it, and gave me a letter of reprimand. I then submitted Inspector General complaints, equal opportunity complaints, a congressional, and I even served my entire chain of command an affidavit. All of those were ignored. Within 7 days of filing the congressional complaint, I was recommended for discharge. They sent me to a discharge board, October of 24. The board voted to discharge me for failing to obey a lawful order, but voted to discharge me honorably. I don't know how you can discharge someone for failing to obey a lawful order, but still give them an honorable. Anyway, while that packet was en route to the Secretary of Defense, and my lawyer and I rebutted it, there was a lot of hearsay and apparent false testimony during the board against me. I submitted multiple new Inspector General and equal opportunity complaints. Fast forward to March of this year, a mid-level general removed my pay with only 2.5 business days notice and placed me on involuntary excess leave and shut off all my pay and allowance. And that is while my case is still in appeal. at that time in March, my case hadn't even made it to the Secretary of the Air Force. And I just got word about 2 weeks ago that my packet now has made it, and it's being deliberated upon right now.
Well, it's a long path, which makes me puzzled. The putting you in an excess leave status and no pay with 2.5 days notice. What level? Do you know what level this general was at in the command chain? Was it a numbered Air Force, Major Command?
It was a 2-star level, the numbered. I won't mention it just because I don't want. I'm just trying to mention facts here. But my lawyer and lawyers I've spoken to have said that they have not seen action such as this taken against an officer unless the officer is already incarcerated or they are a convicted felon and a violent criminal. So far, no one has ever seen this happen.
Yeah, the only time I've ever seen it is when I took command of a squad and I inherited a convicted officer that was in prison serving his sentence. So we inherited him, and that's where I've seen it done with. That's the extent of it. So, I mean, it's very unusual. That's why I asked exactly what level in the chain of command this general was, because probably for a major, I would think the first general officer in the chain of command would have to be it to make that kind of call. But that means the wing commander pushed that up there and took the squadron commander's recommendations or changed their recommendations. One of the two. Do you get copies of all that paperwork?
The only paperwork that I have copies of in that regard was the initiation of my discharge. After that, and after my packet went on to the Secretary of Defense, I was told I have to FOIA it or do a Freedom of Information Act request just to see the paperwork.
That's very interesting. We've got some questions from our live audience. We'll go ahead and take one of those real quick before we end this segment. Go ahead, Shell is our host over there. What's the question?
We have Cookie, sir.
Good afternoon. Thank you both for your service. Question I had is, when they are looking at your religious exemption or exception, how do they measure to tell you whether you can get one or not get one?
I think I missed the first part of the question.
When they Skip, when they are looking at your religious exemption request, how do they measure whether it's a valid one or make a decision that no, this is not a real religious belief?
Sure. Normally, and according to the DoD's own regulations, that request goes through a chaplain review team. A member is supposed to have an interview with a chaplain who then documents the sincerity of the service member's stated beliefs and whether or not they're willing to sacrifice their beliefs for the sake of the request. I spoke to the former head installation chaplain at Scott Air Force Base because he previously dealt with a lot of the COVID accommodations. And he said pretty quickly we could tell if a service member was sincere or not. And if a service member wavered on whether or not they were willing to lose their career, that's when we started asking questions. But from the get-go, I have been very adamant that I'm willing to lose my career over this. I am completely sincere, and I can't violate my religious conviction.
Yeah. Hey, I completely understand. I think if I was still in, considering the aborted fetal issue, I would be asking for a religious accommodation myself because I don't believe in that. I think it's wrong. And it terminates a human life that has rights given to us by God, and I don't agree with it. So I would be asking for the same thing. I cannot blame you for that. I really can't blame you, though, for asking for a medical exemption, Skip. It's blowing my mind that the medical profession has destroyed its own credibility over the COVID vaccine mandate, the whole pandemic response. The entire medical profession has blown all of its credibility. I don't believe anything that comes out of a medical provider's mouth these days, unless I look it up myself and go get a second and third opinion on things before I make a decision on any medical advice. But when it came to the letter of reprimand, did you get a defense attorney to help you fight that, or how was that process played out so far for you?
It was not simple. I was bounced around between 5 different sets of defense attorneys. At least 1 or 2 recused themselves. 2 were completely unhelpful, and I had to fire them, and finally settled on a 5th. But all along the way, the military defense attorneys are not eager to defend service members against the stated policy and defend the service members' constitutional rights.
So the concept of the Area Defense Council being separate from the chain of command staff judge advocate's office, which are the prosecutors in criminal cases in the military, and the Area Defense Council, they don't work for any commanders on the base. That concept's been compromised, is what it sounds like to me.
The defense attorneys have told me that themselves. They all work in the same pool. It's the same chain of command, and they bounce back and forth. You usually are a prosecuting attorney first, and then if you do well at that, then you go be a defense attorney. But still the same structure eventually rates on the same people. And if they want to stay in that career field, then they don't want to rock the boat. And they personally told me that their careers would be jeopardized if they defended people against COVID. And then I feel I experienced it in my lack of defense during the flu shot debacle.
Yeah, I think that's why you saw President Trump and the new chairman of the Joint Chiefs fire all of the service JAG leadership, top leaders. I wondered about that. When they came in. I believe that's why you saw that, because I've talked to and interviewed JAGs that had to leave the service or were oppressed under this system that's come up post-COVID, during COVID and post-COVID. And that stovepipe between defense counsel and prosecuting has been totally compromised, it sounds like. And what you're telling me confirms what I already had heard. Well, we got to take one more break. When we come back, we'll hear from, I think, your attorney, David Schounts, about constitutional issues. And I want to talk to you, get your perspective on this as a constitutional rights issue. And that's what we're really talking about here, folks. I'll be right back with active duty Air Force Major and C-130 pilot Skip talking about his case pending Secretary of the Air Force decision on whether he's involuntarily discharged or not. We'll be right back.
Hello, I'm Brandon House. I want to thank you for all your support at wvwfoundation.com that helps make possible pushing out 24/7 content for free. Without your support, we'd have to put it all behind a paywall. But thanks to you and your support through our foundation, we're able to push it out for free as a broadcast service and broadcast ministry of WVW Foundation. Please consider going there and setting up an automatic monthly contribution, or go there and make an occasional contribution. If you prefer to support us through the mail, you'll find our mailing address there at wvwfoundation.com. You can also call and make your contribution over the phone by calling 901-825-0652. That's 901-825-0652. Again, all these details are available at wvwfoundation.com. Thank you for your support as we try to help people around the world understand the times through the lens of a Christian worldview.
Constitution matters more than what some expert calls a crisis. It feels great, and it has been good to have the president say, to have the Secretary of Defense say this was unfair and unjust, which is very helpful language. But to actually acknowledge, like a federal court has and other federal courts will, this was unlawful, to get out ahead of that and do this right and not be overly concerned about the ramifications, we can address those, would do a lot. It would do a lot for good order and discipline. It would do a lot to restore integrity. And then this could be a success story. This could be training for future military officers to say, hey, even when there's a crisis, even when there's a so-called pandemic, we can still do the right thing and survive as a country. And the Constitution matters more than what some expert calls a crisis.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's Whistleblower Wednesday, and we're talking about the active duty Air Force C-130 pilot. The Major, Skip, is discussing his case with us, and that it's pending a decision from the Secretary of the Air Force on whether he's going to be involuntarily discharged or not. And Skip, I think Davis's comments there about the Constitution really get to the heart of the matter. Two things. One, this is about civil rights. And your basic constitutional rights of religious freedom, the freedom of the individual to not have something forced in their body, and that, two, it could be a great teaching tool in officer and non-commissioned officer leadership training if we could get to the bottom of this and resolve it in the way that's in favor of the oath that you took to the Constitution instead of the road that it's currently on, which is antithetical to your rights and to the Constitution itself. Your thoughts?
Yes, I'm really grateful that you brought that up about officer training. I've talked to many people in my circles, and even just thinking back to my own training, as officers, even enlisted, but especially as officers who are charged with leading the force, we do not receive training on the Constitution other than a few days in our ROTC or academy classes, and we don't see the Constitution again until our third level, basically the 15-year mark of our military service, which is our third level of professional military education. At that point, that's most of the time the first exposure that us as officers have had to the Constitution, this thing we've sworn an oath to support and defend with our lives. And that's a major foul. If we are swearing an oath to it, then we need to have adequate training on it, and also the UCMJ, on what is a lawful order, what is an unlawful order, when can you not make an order or give an order to someone, and you need to understand, are their rights being violated? What does the Constitution say? Can I violate their personal security? Can I force them to take a medical product, regardless of whether or not the medical product is effective or not, regardless of whether or not it has full FDA approval? Are you allowed to violate someone's rights to refuse medical treatment? So far, the Constitution says no.
Yeah, it's. I think that's one of the most important points of this whole debate and this whole process that needs to be borne out and told the truth about. I wanted to ask you, some people have described you as a whistleblower because of your role in the COVID case that we talked about, Doster versus Kendall and everything. Do you think that that you yourself being highlighted as a potential whistleblower has led to these follow-on actions based on the flu shot request for accommodation, both ways, really, that you requested accommodation on that? Do you think that has had an adverse impact on the decision-making in your case that's led you to where the position you're in?
I have no concrete proof of that. However, it does feel like that, especially since I was recommended for discharge after my third protected communication, which was my congressional inquiry that I filed. Within 7 days of that I was recommended for discharge. Even the person in the complaints department of the IG office and others I've spoken to seem to me, it feels like that is a reprisal. And I was highlighted during COVID that I said no, and I was looked at as an officer who wouldn't follow so-called lawful orders, and that I've been negatively highlighted since then.
Yeah, and let's be clear, the order turned out to not be lawful because of the lack of the FDA-approved vaccine. Even then it was unlawfully implemented by all of these people that are in these chains of command that are making the decisions on that. So, a lot of things beyond your control. The only thing in your control, Skip, is to maintain your oath. I posture that you have maintained your oath, and I appreciate you for that. And I think every officer that comes after you in all the services, eventually the truth will be nailed down, accountability will be had at some level, and the right things will be taught. In this case will be one of them. I think, that will be taught as to how not to approach taking care of your people and how not to approach violating your oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. Let's talk about your family for a second. You lost your paycheck with 2.5 days notice. And yes, you've gotten it back, but aren't there issues with the return of pay?
Yes, I'll be delicate here as I share the details, but we had a little bit of personal leave saved up right when that happened. So I was authorized to take that personal leave in order to get a paycheck at the end of March and early April. But when that expired, my pay did stop. And I have since, even after my pay was turned back on last week, I've requested back pay, but I was told I have to petition the Board of Corrections for Military Records in order to seek that restitution. The back pay that I lost was, and the leave that I lost during that time is not automatic.
Wow. And has your family been able to, have you guys been able to support your family's finances since all this happened?
Well, it was kind of a perfect storm. My wife lost the contract that she had as an exceptional family member provider in the Air Force, and she was without income at the same time I was. We had to borrow money from family for car repairs, and we had 2 major home repairs that we had to take care of. So it completely ate through our savings. We've survived based solely on the generosity of friends, family, and strangers. We were able to make ends meet, but it has been a very difficult and stressful time. I won't lie.
Yeah, God has a habit of finding a way, even at the most terrible of times, my friend. Speaking of support, though, has there been? I know there's been a lot of outreach of support. You just mentioned it, but having witnessed that and participated in that and received that support, how has that community response inspired you to keep going?
I would say even equally with any monetary donation people have given us, and my wife and I have prayed for every single donor, including the anonymous ones. The comment section has been what's kept us afloat. So many people have shared their personal stories on our page. People have talked about the anthrax debacle and the illegality and unlawful nature of the anthrax mandate. People have reached out and said that they were injured by the flu shot or injured by the COVID shot. And so many people have said, we applaud you for what you're doing. We know it's extremely difficult, but you're doing the right thing. God bless you.
Well, that's fantastic. As you've thought through this process and you're continuing to go through it, do you have a message that you give to folks that you've run into and become friends with or acquaintances with that are going through similar challenges and facing this kind of thing? What kind of message and advice do you give them?
A friend of mine, Commander Rob Green Jr., wrote a book called Defending the Constitution Behind Enemy Lines. I believe you've already read it, but he quotes me on page 157.
Ever.
Go ahead.
He quotes me on page 157, and a mantra that I've chosen to live by and I pass along to others is, if you keep saying yes when you shouldn't, you won't be able to say no when you should. So stand up early, stand up for what is right, and don't back down. It's hard, but the longer you stand, the easier it becomes, and the more that will join you.
Yeah, I mean, the news just broke today, and Rob broke it, that he's been formally told that he's now under investigation 4 years into this. And I've had him on my show a couple of times, and we've talked about his book. And I think his book was the inspiration for a lot of people to really keep going and stay in the fight because it's a righteous fight. It's the right one. I think his book and him speaking out is the reason why President Trump and Secretary Hegseth have the knowledge they have so that they could, with a clear conscience, issue the orders to stop this and to order reinstatement of everybody that's been harmed over the COVID-19 exception. So Yeah, it's very interesting. So I guess one more question as we get to the end, Skip, and that is you're waiting for the Secretary of Air Force's decision. I know that you want to stay in the military and everything, but will you continue, regardless of the outcome of this, advocating for service members' rights or constitutional rights and advocating for accountability for senior officers and senior NCOs that have said yes too often, as Rob said, and weren't able to say no when it counted?
The original reason I joined the military is not the reason why I'm staying in now. And the reason why I am fighting to stay in now, and whether or not the Secretary of the Air Force chooses to retain me, I will continue supporting and defending our Constitution and encouraging others to uphold that oath, to know what it means to take that oath and the responsibility they have to defend the rights of every single service member and every single citizen in this country. So I don't plan on stopping that anytime soon.
Well, fantastic, my friend. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story with us. I know you've shared it far and wide with a lot of independent media, but I really wanted to get you in here and get this documented and everything. Tell folks how they can find you and support you guys, if that's still out there, before we get to the end here. You got about 20 seconds.
Sure. I don't have any social media. If you search Gateway Pundit and our last name, spelled SCHILPEROORT, you will be able to find 2 articles by J.M. Phelps. And the most recent one has a link to our story that my wife put up.
Well, thank you very much, Skip. And God bless you. We're praying for you. Pray for the Secretary of the Air Force that he makes the right decision, which is to keep this man in the United States Air Force. Make him a commander, Mr. Secretary, because you need commanders with honor and ethics to replace the ones that are going to have to be relieved and taken out, let go from the service because they have made the wrong decision over and over. Tomorrow, we will have CW3, Brandon Budge, U.S. Army helicopter pilot, and believe it or not, he's still facing discharge over the COVID-19 mandate. Come on, Secretary Hegseth, you got to get these cases into a special office and get them fixed. I'll see you then. It'll be Truth Thursday.
Faith, spiritual values, moral issues, government, economy, education, work, responsibility. What we think about these depends on our worldview. Now, VCY America presents Worldview Radio with Brannon House.
And welcome. Glad you're with us on this July 8th, 2025. I'm going to be joined by Annie Cyrus because, well, I know you guys maybe get tired of hearing about it, but it's the truth, and we need you to be vigilant. It looks as though the deep state, and different people define that differently, but it looks as though the deep state is preparing the way for there to be a major terrorist attack in the United States of America. And just the way they exploited 9/11, gave us the Patriot Act and all that surveils us, the next terrorist attack will, I believe, make 9/11 look like a small event, which it was not, but it'll look like that compared to what's coming, I believe. And then all the money that was in the BBB, Big Beautiful Bill, for biometrics and surveillance and will go into effect. And we'll see the accomplishment of the World Economic Forum and people agreeing to things they would otherwise never agree to under the guise of safety. But I'm about to detail to you stories that are documented where our government is lowering the walls and setting the stage to allow our enemies to carry out a massive terrorist attack in America. This is not conjecture. This is not hearsay. This is not rumor. This is not conspiracy. You would not do these things that we're about to detail factually, even from mainstream media that are being done, unless you want something to happen. You must ask, why would you want something like this to happen? The change comes from the conflict. I quote it so many times. James McGregor Burns, a globalist, wrote a book in 1984, The Power to Lead. He said the founding fathers have been too smart for us, too shrewd for us. Frail linkages and bridges will not get the job done. We can only get the people to go where we want them to go under a stupendous national crisis. And we don't want to see harm come to any American. But particularly, we don't want to see harm come to those in this audience. We're very protective of our audience. We also don't want to see our children and our grandchildren shipped off to another war like after 9/11.